I'm Catherine Gustafson from the office of Gustafson Guthrie Nickel. We have offices in Seattle and in Washington, D.C. It's a great honor to be part of this. We love D.C. and let's see if we have something to offer. And we hope that we really like the idea of a collaboration and a think tank. So we're offering one part of that for others to work with us, or we work with them on the different ideas. So the basic is that our world is changing, and our world is changing environmentally, and it's going to need a new cultural aesthetic to go with that environment. And so how do we evolve a cultural aesthetic from an aesthetic that we know today? And that is something that happens over time, and it's gradual. And trying to understand a problem of adaptive management, because we don't really know what's going to happen. We predict what's going to happen. And so we need something that can evolve over time. And so we know that in DC, it takes time to build things. 20 to 30 years is a pretty average project. And so we've predicted things out to close to the end of the century in different stages. And how do we assess what's going on now? So we start at the top of this graphic. We design now, we implement, we monitor around 2040, we move to the next stage, we evaluate, we learn 2070, we adjust, we shift. So what we're proposing today is a process and also a way of moving through what we know today as far as tidal change. And so in 2020, we have 3 feet, 2046, 2079, and we're going up to 12 feet. So we know today how to plan for the next 20, 30 years, and also to have that evolve afterwards as we learn more in the process. Now, this is what we know today, that our tidal range is at 3 feet. Now, watch this graph, how it does sort of a corner up. That is flood surge. The flood surge are a couple times a year, but your tidal is every day. And so we're right at 3 feet, but we're getting a flood surge up to 9. That's why you see the cherries flooding. In stage 2, 2040, we think we're going to be at 6 feet, but look at the flood surge, we're up at 12. Jefferson is at 11.10, 4. FDR is 8.66. Tidal, the edge, a hard edge right now is 3.52. So even in stage 2, we would be flooding the Jefferson lower plinth, not the memorial itself. And then in stage 3, we're moving up to the flood surge is at 18, but our tidal is at 12. So we're constantly trying to understand what's going to happen to this cultural landscape and how do we evolve with that tidal surge and flooding, and also respect the cultural aspects of this place. Now, this just does the same thing, but in graphics, if you don't do anything, right? So this is 2040, you've lost basically most of the peninsula. By the time stage 2, your sea level rise is coming into the reflecting pool. And by the time of stage 3, you're getting into the monumental core and flooding most of DC itself, because the gates of Constitution will be too low. So taking that as bad news, this is even worse news, because this is flood. That was tidal. So the tidal at 12 feet, you can see the monumental core here. This is at the turn of the century. But the flood surge is much beyond the tidal. And we're just going up to the end of the century. Now, what we're talking about is how do we use infrastructure to protect the city? Because it is a city, it is the monumental core, it is the National Mall, it's museum rows, it's everything that has a national significance to DC. And so we think we need to protect the city at this point and still allow the environment to exist. So one of the things we're looking at is raising contour levels up to the 18 by the end of the century, and protecting for, in the beginning, for an annual flood surge in stage 2, which is 15 feet. So I want to go back to this cultural aesthetic. Right now we have an aesthetic of an edge with cherry trees and water and monuments. And then we have some play fields on the other side. We have no really ecological view. And what I love about looking at art is that artists paint what is an emotional, desirable, and beautiful. And so this is a Matisse painting that shows a walk through the forest with prospect on high, looking down at the water through a filtration of light and having the light bounce back off the water, and a pathway that curves that gives you the expectation of discovery. So looking at that, what is the evolving of this cultural aesthetic, and how can we learn to move it slowly so it goes through time? So that's why we're working on this very long time scale. So the first stage, we're raising land only along the edge of the Potomac here to the 18, and we're starting a nursery of floodplain forest to introduce this new ecology into this area. In stage 2, where we're coming up to 9 feet, we take the nursery, we plant the new forest, and we create new cherry areas and meadow areas up at that 18 feet that are above the final flood of 18 feet. At this point, we have to put a protective wall for FDR because it will be flooded at 9 feet, and we've moved MLK to higher ground. By the time we get to stage 3, MLK is higher ground. We have a new monument here. But again, we're controlling, which I forgot to say, is from the very beginning, we're repairing the floodgates. Now the floodgates are at 15 feet. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back. So it's not marked here. So the floodgates are at 15 feet. And so even up to the high tide, stage 3 of 12 feet, we're protected by the floodgates. But if we go to the flood surge of 18, it will flood over just at that point. So we're introducing new marshes on the edge. This is in the first phase. This is the existing tidal basin profile. We are introducing fill and different ecologies, native ecologies, that work with this edge and with wildlife. Again, changing aesthetic. This is an example of an Anacostia River freshwater marsh that is basically the new aesthetic that we're working towards gradually. It's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. And so it's a very strong message of how we care about our environment. So how does it work? Stage 1, 2040. We have the controlled water level at 3 feet because the floodgates are controlling both tidal and flood. That's the existing pathway. We're starting to move cherry trees up, and this is the Independence Avenue is still able to be used. But when you see stage 2, we lose Independence Avenue because it will be flooded. There's a new higher path at 14 and a new lower path in the same position as the old path at 10. So we're above. So this is in, right? This is in 50 years. So it's a slow move, but it's a gradual move, and the aesthetics of it change with the introduction of the marsh and introduction of native flowering trees and not just Japanese flowering trees. From that stage 3, our final stage, we have replaced that lower walk with a floating boardwalk over the marsh, and the higher path at 14 is still above the high tide of 12, but it will flood. So, and as you can see, the Japanese cherry trees are starting to disappear, and the native cherries and flowering trees are becoming more dominant. So this is high tide, just in the image of being on that boardwalk. It's a new aesthetic. You're not with the water right next to you, and you're not with pink cherries, but you're with native cherries and with wetland marshes at your feet, and the Washington Monument that tells you exactly where you are. So ecology, part of this is a floodplain forest that is an existing type of forest in this region. These are the main players as far as trees. The monumental are the lilydendron tuliparia. We have introduced those openings at 18 feet that would be cherries, and we can still have Japanese cherries because it's not flooded. But as we move into the flood surge level at 18, you can see it right here, these trees are adaptive to that type of flooding. As it's really something spectacular, these forests, because they're so cathedral-like and they're so monumental. And so it's like the monumental of nature next to the monumental of Washington, D.C., and having this force of nature that we thought was very appropriate as a way to be adaptive to the environment. So here we're creating these meadow clearings. These actually happen in the floodplain forest with windfalls. And so these are the directions the wind would normally fall the trees and creating meadows. And as we introduce, you can see that again, here are our floodgates repaired to +15. Just 3 feet above were our meadows, with the annual flooding here at 15 feet, stage 2, 18 feet at stage 3. And this is the floodplain forest and the native cherries and the marshes that are coming in. So it's an evolving clearing, and it's that we can see how we start in stage 1 with protecting the existing cherries, starting to introduce natives. Stage 2, the floodplain forest is planted. In stage 3, the ornamental cherries slowly disappear, the meadows appear with the different habitat and biodiversity, and we have the cherry trees that are, or different flowering trees that are native to the region. These are basically what we're dealing with as an idea. This is what we have in the ornamental species of the tidal basin and vernacular DC. As we move to the flowering species, Appalachian Piedmont and coastal plains, we also have generally flood intolerant here to generally flood tolerant. And so this is that slow shift of evolving aesthetics. So the clearing at 18, these are just some images of how we see it moving. One of the things, we have too much concentration around the tidal basin. We're trying to spread out the offering. So thus, there are a number of different places, a number of different meadows and areas to have activities in. So this shows basically the topography, how it works. So in stage 1, you can see the 18 only takes in this area. We're integrating the marshes at this point. FDR is still in place, MLK is in place, and Jefferson. As we move to the flooding, you can see how the flooding takes over all the peninsula here. The highways are still okay, but we're getting flooding into this neighborhood all through here. And this is 2 to 3 times per year. We think it's fine at this stage. Then as we go to stage 2, this is one of the big moves that I think is really important, is to finish the mall. And so this is what I call Museum Row. And this is this picturesque landscape that exists here. And this is that monumental power landscape that goes straight down, going from the Capitol to Lincoln, and really framing the reflecting pool that is badly framed, actually, and introducing a new area that is already starting to happen with the memorials, but making this an official cultural extension of the mall. Now that culture can be landscape, it can be environmental, but having that whole form finish itself on Lincoln, it's kind of gets sloppy and floppy down here. And so trying to reintroduce that force and then give a new, strong, contemporary picturesque to this, to move this into the future. So that's part of some of the biggest moves here, and getting an offering that is much more diverse around. So that's stage 2. When you see the flooding, because we've gotten the 18 feet up right in stage 1, by stage 2, we've extended the 18 feet over here. We're still getting a fair amount of flooding of the marshes, which is healthy and desirable, but we're losing most of the peninsula. So this is what FDR would look like with a 3-foot wall to protect it from the flooding at high tide at 9 feet. And this is stage 3. High tide is at 12 feet. The wall of 3 feet protects it here all the way into stage 3. And then in stage 3, we build over the freeways. We actually bring the land over so that the people here and over here can actually use and have direct access to the peninsula. That would be an extension of the floodplain forest and having openings in different places for people to go and have a basically healthy lifestyle in a very urban environment. So that stage 3 does have that 18-foot. You can see by raising these areas, we still protect the city from massive flooding, and we protect these new neighborhoods and allow this area to become useful in its environmental impact and also as a place for recreation and ecology. So that's basically our proposal, to have an adaptive evolution of the ecology and of the culture and of the aesthetic, that it will be something that has major impacts on the existing memorials and needing to find a way to preserve them. I don't think we should get rid of them. This is Washington, D.C. This is the capital, and I think the cultural aspect, we all feel the cultural aspect is very important, but not to the negation of the environmental as we move forward. So this is, we want that environment of the river to be part of this, and so allowing a certain amount of flooding to come in, but still preserving the major cultural institutions throughout. So the first stage, it's important to realize that we need to do the floodgates and we need to but by stage 3, we'll still have preserved the major monuments and introduced new ecology and new spaces for people to visit and have activities in. Again, that new aesthetic, remember, we have too much density around the tidal basin itself. We need to expand that offering beyond and change how people view that offering. But again, this is my modern Matisse, wink, wink, of how we can appreciate the tidal basin from a different height and still have the ecology come in.